everyone. We would like to welcome you to our third seminar for shipping companies or shipping operators on the implementation of the upcoming emission trading system for maritime. So my name is Polona Grigorin. I'm the head of unit, Director General for Climate Action at the European Commission, that is responsible also for maritime emissions. And we are again here today with our colleagues from the European Maritime Safety Agency. You have problems hearing me? Try to do that. Is this any better? Great, that's good news. Thank you very much for flagging this. So just to welcome you again from our side, the European Commission, as well as the European Maritime Safety Agency, EMSA, to this webinar on the extension of the EU emission trading. You can still not hear us. Actually, is one of the laptops.
The other room has a better sound, but it was kind of booked, but it's free. I don't know if we can move on to the other room.
Should I try to go there, see how we hear? Or?
Okay. So we're going to try to find a better solution, but for the time being, I'm going to try to speak louder directly into the mic. Still very difficult to hear you. Okay. Put in the chat. Sorry? It's okay?
For him, it works good.
Okay, it seems to be a bit strange because we also tested here and it seems to work well for some participants and less well for the others. I hope that participants who cannot hear me well can try to put the volume as loud as they can on their own devices. You cannot hear us very well. But can we try with just our mic?
They say it's okay.
Sorry?
They say it's okay now.
Well, one just said that it's not. Is this acceptable? Let's put it that way. Better now. Okay, I'm going to try this. Meanwhile, we'll also try to find another microphone that maybe can help us get through this webinar better. So without spending too much time, I would just like to welcome you to this third webinar. At the last webinar organized 3 weeks ago, we had basically we ran a survey to ask you what would be the most helpful topic to focus on for today's webinar, where there is most need of clarifications and explanations. So, what we heard is that most of you would like to hear more about the notion of the shipping company as the entity responsible for the MRV and ETS compliance. So that is something that we're going to focus on today. We're also going to focus on the attribution of the shipping company to the relevant administering authority, the information that the shipping company needs to provide to that authority, and also how to request the opening of the maritime operator holding account in the Union Registry. So with today's webinar, we want to go really into more details on these above mentioned topics, also building on the many inputs and questions that we received from you through the help desk and other communication activities in the last weeks. Just to recall that we, of course, also have available recordings from the previous webinars on the website, both of the Commission and EMSA. And we would really like to recommend that you consult those as well if you're still not familiar with the EU ETS extension to the maritime sector. Those recording and presentations cover the policy context, which made possible the EU extension in the first place, but also step-by-step live demos on the ETS MRV IT environment that, of course, some of you are already using and will also use for the ETS in the future, and how to open the Union Registry account online. So given the high number of participants, we would again like to ask you to submit any questions, and I see some of you are already doing it during the presentation in the chat, and we will try to address those during the dedicated point at the end of today's agenda. So just for your information, we should also mention that this webinar is recorded and will be again publicly available on our website. But of course, the name of the participants will again be fully anonymized. So thank you in advance for the participation today. I propose that we take a short break to try to sort out the audio issues. And then I will pass the floor to my colleagues, notably Timothy and Noel, the team leader here in our team for the maritime emissions, to launch our presentation. Thank you. And thanks for your patience.
Thanks a lot, Polona, and good morning to all participants. So could you put the presentation on, Marisha? Mm-hmm. So today we've got an hour and a half, and we'd like to dive with you into several topics. Next slide, please. So as a first step, we're going to go quickly through what shipping companies need to do as the first step to get ready to the ETS extension to maritime transport. I will go through that part. Then Noklan will dive into the topic of shipping company in order for you to really understand what do we mean by shipping company in the context of the ETS extension to maritime transport. We'll also highlight and explain to you the role of administering authority and national administrator. And we'll also give you a presentation, a demonstration of the information that you can find on our website, DG CLIMA's website, as well as the website of the European Maritime Safety Agency, EMSA. And importantly, we'll finish the meeting by a Q&A session. And we therefore invite you throughout the presentation to write your question in the chat. But let's start now with the first step. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So before going into more details about specific topic that we want to focus on today, we thought it would be good to remind the first step that shipping companies should go through in perspective of the ETS extension to maritime transport. The first step is for you to get familiar with the new requirements and to understand the new legislative framework. To do that, you can consult the latest legislative text. So you can go and check those in the official journal of the European Union. But you can also go on our DG CLIMA website, where you will have a direct link all the relevant new pieces of legislation, and will explain to you at the end of the webinar how to do that in practice. You should you could also look at the various communication materials that we have been developing for shipping operators that you can find on our website and on EMSA's website. And this includes a long series of frequently asked questions. You have more than 40 frequently asked questions on our website. You also have access to the recordings of the webinar that we did in September and earlier this month, including the presentation. And you also have the email address of the help desk that we have established to answer to your eventual question. What you should also do is be clear about the responsible entity, the legal entity that will be responsible for your vessels for ETS and MRV requirements. You should also think about the need to adapt your contract. Possibly you will have to add new clauses in your charter party contract. Possibly, and for sure, you will have to modify your contract with your verifiers because the ETS extension imply more verification activities to be done by the verifier. You could also think about preparing eventual mandate in case the ship owner wants to assign the ETS MRV responsibility to the dockholder of the ISM company. We'll explain you that in more details after. And what you can also do is already start revising and preparing the revision of the monitoring plan. The new template for the monitoring plan is already published, so you can already start collecting the information that you will need to provide in order to update your MRV monitoring plan. Now, as from 1st January next year, you will have to develop the revised monitoring plan in ETS and MRV. And that's important because in the past, a monitoring plan could be developed outside the IT system. And from January next year, that's not possible anymore. So all the monitoring plan will have to be developed in the IT system in ETS and MRV. And once ready, those revised monitoring plan will have to be submitted for assessment to your verifiers through the IT system. On 1st February 2024, next year, the Commission will publish a list of an attribution list that will associate an administering authority from a member state to each shipping company. You will therefore at that time have to identify your administering authority, identify the member state that will be in charge of following your company, and you will have to request the opening of a maritime operator holding account that we currently usually call MOHA, for Maritime Operator Holding Account. And you will have to request this opening within 40 working days. For the companies that will be on the list, their assigned authority will be directly visible in the IT system, in the ETS and MRV. And for the ones that are not on the list, for the new companies, then they will be able to get support from the ETS and MRV help desk to assist them in determining, identifying the responsible administering authority. And they will have 65 working days from the first port of call at any EU port to request the opening of a maritime operator holding account. And the next step in that process is 1st April next year, where each company will have to submit their assessed monitoring plan to their administering authority for approval, because that's one of the tasks of the administering authority, the approval of monitoring plan. quite dense information, but we will now go through different aspects of these first steps to hopefully provide more clarification. I will now give the floor to Noklan to give you more information about the concept of shipping company under the ETS extension to maritime transport.
Thank you very much, team. Good morning, everyone. I'm Noklan Lang. I work as a policy and legal officer in DG CLIMA, and in particular on the ETS, Maritime and the MRV. So we will give you a detailed presentation about the notion of shipping company. Our objective today is to address 4 key questions. What is a shipping company? How is a shipping company attributed to a member state? What information must a shipping company provide to its administering authority in respect of a shipping company? And finally, how to request a MOHA, a maritime operator holding account, in the Union Registry. So the first part of this presentation will be about the entity responsible for ETS and MRV compliance. There are many types of entities surrounding a ship with various roles and responsibilities. Among those entity types, the question is, who can be responsible for compliance with the obligations laid down in the ETS directive and the MRV regulation? The co-legislators, the European Parliament and the Member States, made it clear in the legal text as regard who is responsible for compliance in respect of the emissions from a given ship. It is the so-called shipping company. Shipping company is clearly defined in the legal text, the ETS directive and the MRV regulation. According to that definition, which can be found in the legal text, who can be the shipping company? As you will see on this slide, there are 2 possibilities. It's either the registered owner of the ship or the so-called dockholder ISM company of the ship. So today we want to pass on to you a key message. We know that a shipping company in the maritime world can have a different meaning than the one that the co-legislators have agreed on in the legal text. So under the ETS directive and the MRV regulation, the shipping company, the entity responsible for compliance with the ETS obligations and the MRV obligations, can be either the registered owner or the ISM company of the vessel. So shipping company, I'm repeating myself, means either the registered owner or the ISM company. And by default, the entity responsible for compliance will be the registered owner. But if the registered owner and the ISM company agree that the ISM company will not only take responsibilities imposed by the ISM code, but also the responsibilities imposed by the ETS directive and the MRV obligations, then in that case, the ISM company can be considered as the shipping company. We will go into more detail about that later on, but there is an obligation to inform the administration about the potential delegation of responsibilities, the mandates by the registered owner to the ISM company. So it's about a document that will be showed to the administration and signed by both the registered owner and the ISM company. Now on this slide, I will address two questions that we have received frequently. First, what is a registered owner? A registered owner refers to the owner specified on the certificate of registry of a ship, and a registered owner is assigned a IMO, unique company and registered owner identification number. So this is an entity which can be clearly, easily identified. Another frequent question that we have received is, can a bareboat charterer be a shipping company? And the reply is that a bareboat charterer can be a shipping company only if the bareboat charterer is the ISM company in respect of a given ship, and if, of course, that bareboat charterer, that is the ISM company, has accepted to assume responsibilities for ETS and MRV obligations. There is another key principle to keep in mind. This is the following: the shipping company responsible for compliance must assume responsibilities for the obligations under both the ETS directive and the MRV regulation. This means that if the shipping company is the registered owner will assume responsibilities for the ETS obligations, but also necessarily for the MRV obligations. And in the second scenario, if the shipping company is the ISM company will have to assume both the ETS obligations and the MRV obligations. So, of course, a shipping company can be responsible for ETS and MRV compliance in respect of several vessels. On this slide, you see a situation where the shipping company is responsible for the ETS and MRV obligations that apply in respect of three vessels. Compliance with ETS obligations take place at company level, in particular, the obligation to surrender allowances. So for that, there will be an aggregated emissions report at company level. Here we have a situation where an ISM company is the dock holder for several ships belonging to different registered owners, two different registered owners. And of course, in that case, we assume that the ISM company has been duly mandated by each registered owner. So this is a situation where the ISM company is the shipping company responsible in respect of greenhouse gas emissions of vessels belonging to different registered owners. So on the slide, you see an example with three vessels, two belonging to the registered owner Alpha and one belonging to the registered owner Beta, and the emissions of all those vessels would be under the responsibility of the ISM company Omega, who is the dock holder of each of those vessels. Now, that's another question that we have often received. Can a third party that does not qualify as a shipping company continue to have a role in the ETS and MRV? So you might be aware that under the MRV regulation, the definition of shipping company, which is applicable until the end of this year, was different from the one that is now in the ETS directive and the one that it is in the MRV regulation and will apply from the 1st of January 24. And this old definition allowed entities other than the registered owner or the ISM company to be liable, to be responsible for monitoring and reporting a task as per the MRV regulation. With the revised definition, can those actors, those third parties, which do not qualify as a shipping company, keep a role for the performance of operational tasks? The reply is yes, but it's important to note that the shipping company will be considered as the entity liable for overall compliance. So like in other matters, the shipping company can delegate tasks by way of a bilateral contract to a third party. And that third party that does not qualify as a shipping company may have access to the relevant IT tool used for monitoring and reporting tasks, which is ETS MRV. So in practice, this third party can be granted access as a user to the relevant company and its entire fleet. So then the third party would have access to all the vessels, all the companies that are under this big user that you see in dark green. And again, even if the day-to-day tasks are performed by a third party, the shipping company remain responsible for overall compliance. Now I will pass the floor to Tim, who will tell you how a shipping company is attributed to a member state responsible for enforcement.
Thank you, Noklan. So we also received quite some questions about the administering authority, like how do I know which member states will be in charge of following my company? When is the list at the attribution list will be released by the Commission? What are typically the rules to associate a company with an administering authorities? So the aim of this section is really to try to bring some clarification on these questions. And try to explain further the rules link and to explain the role also of administering authorities. So the principle is pretty simple. The principle is really to have a system that reduces administrative burden. So for each shipping company, there will be one member state following and ensuring the enforcement of the rules. It would indeed be much more cumbersome for you as a shipping company if you were to be followed by 2-3 different member states. So we really want to have a system that is as simple as possible and that reduce administrative burden. And this is why we aim at only attributing one member state to one shipping company. So when I say member state, behind member state, you have an administering authority that is responsible to enforce the ETS in respect of a shipping company on behalf of a member state, and that administering authority has a number of different tasks. Typically, it will be the administering authority that, in case an ISM company has been mandated to be the responsible entity, it will be the administering authority that will check that there is a mandate assigning this responsibility to the ISM company. And the mandate should, of course, be signed by both the ISM company and the registered owner. The administering authority will typically also have to approve the monitoring plan for the ships under the responsibility of the shipping company. The administering authority will also be the one that receives the verified emissions report at company level and ensure that it has been properly verified. The administering authority will also be the one that will ensure compliance of the shipping company with the EU ETS application, and that includes, of course, the surrendering of EU allowances. And if necessary, the administering authority is also the one that imposes penalties and sanctions. Next slide, please. So what are the rules to attribute a shipping company to a member state? Those rules are defined in the ETS directive, and they are based on three main principles. The first principle is the following. If a shipping company is registered in an EU member state, then obviously that company is associated with the administering authority of the member state where it is registered. So that's for the company that are registered in the EU. But what about the companies that are not registered in the EU? And there are many of those. For those non-EU shipping company, we first look at their port of call history. So we look if they have done previous port of call in the last 4 preceding monitoring years. If that's the case, if they have a history of port of calls, then we look at the different ports that they have called over this period. And we will associate them with the member state where they had the greatest estimated number of port of call. The aim is really to associate the shipping company where the member state where it does most of its activities, meaning port of calls. But then you have a third possibility. It's the case of a non-EU shipping company that has no history of port of calls because it's the first time that one of its vessels will typically call a port in the EU. And in that case, the non-EU company will be associated with the administering of the member states from where the shipping company started or ended its first voyage. So that's the general principle. And on top of that, there are some complementing rules that were defined in an implementing act. And the implementing act say the following. It says that when we look at where the shipping company are registered, we use for the country of registration, the country that is recorded in ETS and MRV, the well-known IT system. The implementing act also says that when we look at port call data, we should look at port call data as recorded in SafetyNet, which is the European instrument where we record all port of calls happening at EU port. And it also provides some additional rules in 2 specific cases. The first case is the case of a shipping company that is not registered in the EU, that has no port of call history over the last 4 preceding monitoring years, and where the first voyage is a voyage that starts in the EU and that ends in the EU. And in that case, the shipping company will be associated with the member state where the voyage started. So it's a very specific situation. Another very specific situation is the case where you have a non-EU shipping company that has done some port of call in the 4 preceding monitoring years. But when we estimate the number of port of call per member state, it could be that we have the same number of port of calls in 2 or more member states. And in that case, since we are facing a tight situation, the company will be associated with the member states where the shipping company had its first port of call. So all these rules are set and decided in the main legislation, meaning the ETS directive, and in the implementing legislation, the implementing act. Next slide, please. So the ETS directive also foresees that by 1st February next year, the Commission will publish a list of shipping companies that will attribute to each shipping company an administering authority. Next slide, please. So how do we do that? We do that using the following process. So the European Maritime Safety Agency, EMSA, has developed an algorithm in order to reflect all the specific rules that I just explained to you. And they are running the algorithm using specific input that are the following. They use the companies and they take into account the companies as recorded in ETS and MRV. So the algorithm will consider all the companies that are in fact currently responsible for MRV requirements. They will look at the country of establishment of those companies as recorded in ETS and MRV. The algorithm will also consider the fleet, so the ship under the responsibility of each company in ETS and MRV. And for each ship, they will look at the port of calls, and for the port of calls, they will consider data available in SafeSeaNet. Then the algorithm apply the rules defined in the legislation, and the output is and will be a list, which is pretty simple because it's a kind of a two-column document where you have in the first column the list of the name of the company, its IMO number, and then associated with a specific member state. So this algorithm has been run using data from end of November in order to prepare the list that will be published by 1st February 2024. Next slide, please. So some additional information on the list that is important to keep in mind. What is the legal status of the list? And you might wonder typically what happens if my shipping company is not on that list. Does it mean, for instance, that I don't have to fulfill the ETS MRV requirements? The answer to that question is clearly not. It's not because a shipping company is not on the list that the shipping company should not fulfill its ETS MRV requirement. As soon as a shipping company performs a maritime transport activity as defined and as falling under the scope of the ETS directive, then of course the shipping company has the obligation to fulfill all the requirements as detailed in the ETS legislative framework and the MRV rules as well. So in case a shipping company is not on the list, it is the obligation, it is the duty of the shipping company to determine itself the member state that will be attributed to it. And so following the rules that I explained in the previous slides, and the European Maritime Safety Agency, EMSA, through ETS and MRV, will be able to help the shipping company to determine their right administering authority. We also received questions about like companies that understand, you know, the main rules for association, but that wonder what happened, for instance, if we take the case of a non-EU company that next year will move to an EU company. So next year, after the publication of the list, the company will be registered, for instance, in Greece. Does it mean that because they are registered in Greece next year, does it mean that the attribution is changing? And that's not the case. It's important to keep in mind that once the attribution is being done, it remains valid until the review of the list that is planned regularly, and the first review of the list will happen in 2026. So that's also something that you should really keep in mind, is the fact that the attribution remains stable until the next update of the list. I hope that this information helped you better understand the role of administering authority, the rules to associate a shipping company with a member state, and also the legal status of the list. And I will now give the floor to Luca to provide you some more information about what needs to be provided to the shipping company, to its administering authority.
Many thanks, Timothy. Indeed, I will spend now a few minutes to go a bit into the details of the information to be provided by the shipping company to its administering authority. And this is, of course, much relevant in the case mentioned earlier this morning, where we have a delegation of responsibility. Next slide, please. So, if the shipping company is the register owner, there is an obligation for him to provide to its administering authority a document which shall include the list of the ships under its responsibility for both ETS and MRV compliance. The relevant legislative act is the implementing regulation EU 2023/2599, which was recently published in the official journal, which laid down the rules for the application of the directive as regards the administration of shipping companies by administering authority. The key content elements of such a document is listing for each ships which are relevant under the obligation set in the ETS directive, the name and the IMO ship identification number. There is furthermore an obligation on the register owner to update such a document without delay in some cases, namely in the case where the register owner becomes responsible for additional ships, again covered within the ETS scope. In that case, the register owner shall provide the name and IMO ship identification number of such additional ships, but also in the case where a ship stops being under the responsibility of the register owner. So we might have cases where a register owner at a certain point in time decides to withdraw, to change the responsibility. There could be different cases, for instance, in case of selling the ship. In that case, it will be an obligation, again, for the register owner to provide ship's name and IMO identification number, but also this time together with the IMO unique company and the register owner identification number of the new shipping company. Next slide, please. In the case where the shipping company, under the meaning of the regulation and the directive, is the ISM company, so different from the register owner, it is for the ISM company set an obligation to provide its administering authority with a document providing that there is indeed a mandate granted by the register owner, allowing for compliance with ETS and MRV obligation. The relevant document is the same implementing regulation, and specifically this time Article 1 of the Act. It is foreseen that the document shall be drafted in an official language, in the official language of the member states of the administering authority, or alternatively, it can also be drafted in English. It is important to stress that the document must be an original, and in case a copy is provided, the copy must be certified, duly certified. It is important that this document clearly states that the ISM company is mandated to comply with ETS and MRV obligation in respect of the specific specified ship belonging to the register owner. So The slide shows the minimum content of this document, also referred to as legal mandate in our communication and presentation. It will have to contain information about the ISM company. Its name is IMO unique company and register owner identification number. Its country of registration as recorded in GISIS. But it also shall contain information about the register owner itself, who's delegating the responsibility. And such information will be, again, the MO unique company and the register owner identification number as recorded in GISIS, and the contact details of the register owner contact person. At the same time, the document shall contain the date of application of such a mandate, of such delegation of responsibility. And for everyone, for each of the ships with emissions falling within the ETS scope, covered within the mandate, it shall contain the name of the ship and its IMO identification number. Finally, I would like to stress some additional important information, again, on the mandate to be provided to the administering authority by the ISM when duly mandated by the register owner. The relevant act has been published. It contains all the necessary information. But again, I would like to clarify that the Commission does not provide an explicit template for such a mandate, does not provide a Word template, a file template, a document template. The administering authority of the company, on the other hand, may require additional information to be included. So we recommend the ISM companies to check with their respective administering authority whether such additional information are required. We also flag that a very similar document is to be provided to the national administration in the registry where the ISM company will request to open a maritime operator holding account. Again, a possibility that is foreseen only when the ISM company qualifies as shipping company, so if duly mandated. And finally, I would like also to stress the link with verification activities, because under the delegated regulation of verification and accreditation rules currently under revision, which you can consult in its draft form and is expected to be published before the end of the year, such a mandate will also have to be provided to the verifier of the ship, together with the monitoring plan. So it will be a responsibility of the ISM company to contact and check if the administering authority requires any specific workflow for the transmission of the document. And it might also be the case that the administering authority explicitly requires such a document to be uploaded into its MRV. As mentioned in previous webinars, that this MRV will also cater for this possibility, but again, it might be compulsory or not. Please check with your administering authority. And with this, I pass the floor to my colleague Noklan for the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Luca. So yes, this is the fourth and last part of this presentation on the notion of shipping company, this deep dive. And in this fourth part, we will focus on the relations between the shipping companies and the Union Registry. So first, I will give you a brief overview of the Union Registry. For a detailed presentation, please refer to the recordings of the second webinar because my colleagues Ralph, Marta, and Maria presented the Union Registry including its IT aspects, and there were live demos on, for example, how to request an account. So the Union Registry is an IT system that is like online banking system. And the key mission of the Union Registry is to ensure the strict accounting of allowances. This is very important for the emissions trading system. You have two main types of accounts, the trading accounts and the operator holding accounts, including the famous now MOHA, Maritime Operator Holding Account. The Union Registry records the annual verified greenhouse gas emissions of the sectors covered by the EU ETS, and every year the Union Registry allows for an annual reconciliation of allowances and verified emissions. And this is so because the entities subject to the ETS, including the shipping companies, must surrender allowances through the Union Registry, and they must surrender a number of allowances that is equivalent to their annual total verified emissions. And in addition, the Union Registry enabled for some transactions for the transfer of allowances between participants, and this can include in the maritime sector the transfer of allowances from a commercial operator to the shipping company. Now I will present to you 8 slides on one of the next steps for shipping companies, something that you as shipping companies must prepare for in the short run. So first, what is a Maritime Operator Holding Account, a MOHA? So a MOHA is mandatory for a shipping company. It's the account where greenhouse gas emissions are registered and where the shipping company surrenders allowances. As mentioned before, via the MOHA, the shipping company can also transfer allowances or receive, get allowances delivered from, for example, a commercial operator, such as a voyage or time charter. And there is one key principle. It's one shipping company, one maritime operator holding account. So I have a few slides to illustrate this principle, one shipping company, one MOHA, because we have received some questions, and we understand that because of the structure of maritime entities, maritime groups, this is very relevant, and it's important that you understand how this principle applies. So in this first example, we have one parent company on the left hand side, and this parent company has two subsidiaries, subsidiary 1 and subsidiary 2. In that case, each subsidiary qualifies as a shipping company. By contrast, the parent company itself does not qualify as a shipping company within the meaning of the ETS directive and MRV regulation. So the consequence is the following. Each shipping company, each subsidiary must have a maritime operator holding account in the Union Registry. So this is what you see on the right-hand side. Subsidiary 1 has its MOHA in the Union Registry. Subsidiary 2 also has its own MOHA in the Union Registry. It is not possible for the parent company to have some kind of super MOHA where then it will there will be kind of a sub-account for the subsidiaries. Now, the principle is one shipping company, one MOHA. So this is what you see on the right-hand side. And later on, I will explain to you how the parent company could still be involved in the operations that need to take place in the Union Registry. Next slide, thank you. So now we have another example. It's the same structure, corporate structure as before. There is one parent company with two subsidiaries, but this time the subsidiaries do not qualify as shipping companies, but the parent company qualifies as a shipping company. So in this case, the obligation is for the parent company to open a MOHA. And here again, we are applying this principle, one shipping company, one MOHA. Now, I will address the question, how can a shipping company request a MOHA? The shipping company must address its request to the national administrator of its attributed member states. The national administrator is responsible for administering the Union Registry on behalf of the member state. The contact details of each national administrator can be found on the CLIMA, DG CLIMA's website. And you will see contact details and also the address of the website of each national administrator. And this is an important source of information. So we really invite you to look at those. So for the request of a maritime operator holding account, there are deadlines that are laid down in the registry regulation. First, just a quick legal point. So at this precise moment, the revised registry regulation, which takes into account the inclusion of the maritime transport sector in the EU ETS, is in a draft status because it is currently under scrutiny by the European Parliament and the Council. The scrutiny ends in 10 days, end of December, and if the co-legislators do not object, this revised registry regulation with all the legal provisions that I'm referring to in this presentation will apply. So you can find a draft also on the CLIMA website. So now let's go back to the legal deadlines for requesting the opening of a maritime operator holding account. So based on the draft revised regulation, for shipping companies that are on the list of shipping companies and their attributed member states that will be published by the 1st of February 24, those companies on the list will have 40 working days to submit their application for a MOHA. And for the shipping companies that are not on the list to be published in February 24, they will have 65 working days of the first port of call falling within the scope of the EU ETS. What does a shipping company need to provide to the national administrator when requesting a MORA? So that's the question that we will address in the next slides. And this is quite important because this is something that shipping companies can already start preparing. There is indeed quite a number of information to be provided by the shipping company to its national administrator when it requests the opening of a maritime operator holding account. You will see the list of information to be provided in Annex 7A to the draft revised registry regulation. There is quite a number of information to be provided. I haven't listed them all on this slide, but this includes the IMO unique company and registered identification number of the shipping company. When the shipping company is the ISM company, as mentioned by Luca, this ISM company will have to provide to the national administrator the mandate duly signed by the registered owner and the ISM company. And where the shipping company is the registered owner has to provide the list of vessels under its responsibility for ETS purposes. The list of documents to be provided also include a document identifying the structure of the group. This, of course, only applies if the shipping company is part of a group. Please note that national administrators may ask for additional documents. This depends on national rules. The registry regulation provides you with indications of the types of additional documents that national administrators may ask. This can be, for example, bank account details, information on the beneficial owner of the legal entity, but the best way forward is to check the website of your national administrator and or contact your national administrator if necessary to ensure that you have a complete overview of the information that you must provide in order to be able to request a MORA. So we also want to inform you about an important obligation under the Union Registry. It's about the authorized representatives on MORA. Indeed, each shipping company must nominate at least 2 authorized representatives. Those 2 authorized representatives will have access to the MORA. What is an authorized representative? An authorized representative is a natural person over the age of 18. The role of the authorized representative is to act on behalf of the shipping company to perform a task in the Union Registry on behalf of the shipping company, and this includes the surrender of allowances. Please note that there is an administrative procedure to nominate authorized representatives. You have, as a shipping company, to submit a number of information to the national administrator, and then the national administrator will assess the request for nominating authorized representatives and approve or deny this nomination for the request to nominate authorized representatives. Shipping companies also have to provide information. This information is listed in Annex 8 of the registry regulation. So as you can see, there is a number of, there is quite some homework for shipping companies to get ready for the request for MOHA and for the nomination of authorized representatives. So we invite you to already start getting familiar with the requirements and to start collecting the documents so that your request can be ready shortly and you can be granted MOHA as soon as possible. Now I have two last slides on the authorized representatives that are also related to the discussion that we had on the role of the parent company and on the role of a third party that provides services to the shipping company. So as regards authorized representatives, please note that the Union Registry allows for the same natural person to be the authorized representatives on several MOHAs. So on this slide, you have an example of still our parent company, which controls two subsidiaries. And there are two employees of the parent company, Miss A and Miss B, and each of them can be appointed as authorized representative of the MOHA of each of the subsidiaries. So somehow this allows the parent company to play a role in the tasks that have to be performed through the Union Registry, although this parent company does not qualify as a shipping company, and as a consequence of not qualifying as a shipping company, it cannot have its own maritime operator holding account in the registry. This last slide is about the third party to the group of the shipping company and its potential role in the Union Registry. So in this example, it's the same structure as before, a parent company that does not qualify as a shipping company, but this parent company has two subsidiaries which each qualify as a shipping company. And you have Mr. C in orange, who is an employee of a third-party company. Mr. C works as an external service provider to the parent company, to the subsidiaries, and Mr. C can be appointed as an authorized representative on the MOHA of each of the subsidiaries of the parent company. And that's the end of this deep dive into the notion of shipping company. Now I will pass the floor to my colleague Luca, who will show you where you can find information on the ETS and MRV.
Many thanks, Knockland, and very briefly also to give you the chance to recover a bit from this super dense presentation. I will very rapidly show you how to best access the main communication material which is available online. So by a simple Google research, for instance, emissions reduction shipping. Let's see if this leads us to our pages. Exact. This is what usually use as keywords. we land on this page. This is the European Commission climate action page, thematic page dedicated to emissions reduction from maritime transport. This is the main gateway, in my view, to all relevant information. I would strongly recommend you to save these and have a look at this if you're not familiar with it yet. There is a lot of information, general policy context information, but in particular, I would like to stress this part here, the legislative process section, where we are updating almost on a daily basis. At the moment, they are published on the official journal, the links to the relevant acts we are so frequently mentioning in our presentations, and which should be the main reference point for you to get familiar with the system. So for instance, you see some of these acts have already been published in the official journal. So in those cases, the links are already here available. You just click on the relevant act, and this will lead you directly to the official journal of the European Union with all the published version. You will notice that some of these acts are amending acts. So what you will see for some time now in the official journal is the act itself, and the consolidated version of the final act will be available in the coming weeks or months, as this requires some technical time. This address, for instance, a question we received during the event asking about the relationship between the old pre-revision acts and the new acts. Some of these acts are currently in the process of finalizing the scrutiny period. Therefore, you might still have some links to the comitology registry, but it's just a matter of days. This will be replaced by links to the official journal. Some of them have been published, like in the case of the MRV annexes yesterday on the official journal of the European Union, and the others are expected in the coming days and weeks. Then another key section I would like to highlight in our main getaway page is the section on documentation, when you can also have access to the guidance and best practices documents, which we will be revising in the coming weeks and months. And the moment they're ready, we'll be publishing this section, but especially the well-known FAQ section, divided into the ETS part and the MRV part. The release of the updated version is scheduled should take place before end of year. So please monitor this section, as I'm sure that many of your questions and requests for clarification will be addressed there. And finally, I would like to highlight to your attention the links to the previous webinars, the first and the second webinar. I take, for example, this one, the second webinar, which is a link which will also grant you access to the section in the European Maritime Safety Agency dedicated to decarbonization of shipping. Here you have access to the presentations, but also to the actual webinar recordings, which are stored on YouTube. And in the coming days, we will do the same. We will update these links to include the recordings of today's webinars. And with this, I hope short but useful presentation, I open the floor for the final point today, which is the Q&As on the basis of the inputs received in the chat.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you so to Tim and Nokan for the presentations. We'll try to go through the questions we often receive and that we received also today in the chat. Maybe starting with a first general one that we received. It's about whether the Commission will adopt any additional legislation before the application of ETS Maritime, so before the end of this year. And maybe for that question, I will let the team reply.
Thank you, Mathieu. So most of the implementing and delegated acts into the ETS extension to maritime transport have already been adopted by the Commission, and Luca in the demonstration gave you the way and the links to access these acts. What needs to be adopted by the Commission are two implementing acts. One implementing act is about the list of islands and ports, as well as transnational public service contracts and obligation that will be subject to specific exemption derogation under the ETS. And this act will be adopted by the end of the year. And we also, as we discussed this morning, we will also publish the implementing act with the list of shipping company and associated administering authority by 1st February 2024.
Thank you, Tim. Maybe I would also like to inform you that given that we have a few technical issues at the beginning of this webinar, we will extend a bit the length of this webinar until 11:15 Brussels time, so that we have time to go through several questions that were raised. Now I would like to give the floor to our colleagues that are more specialized on IT-related issues, because we have received several questions on such issues. In particular, one asking on whether there will be a direct link, an automatic link between ETS MRV emissions data and what will be entered in the Union Registry. So please, Adela or Alexandra, if you could please address these IT-related questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello. Okay, so if I correctly understood the question, this is related to entering the annual verified emission, if there is any link between ETS MRV and the Union Registry. So the annual verified emissions, they need to be reported in both ETS MRV and the Union Registry. And as you may remember, there are dedicated fields for different types of emissions. There has been a presentation, last presentation from my colleagues describing how the system works. Depending on the national law, the annual verified emissions data can be reported in the Union Registry and can be entered in the system by the member state, by the shipping company, or by the verifier. Of course, there are applicable national rules depending on the country. Related to the automatically transmission from ETS MRV to the Union Registry, currently these are not linked, so there is no automated transmission between MRV and the Union Registry, but this is under analysis from our side, so this possibility of bulk upload of emissions. And I would like to point out another thing here. There will also be the possibility for the national administrators to upload emissions for several maritime operators using an XML file, so something like a bulk upload. But of course, this is dependable on the national laws applicable. The verifier has to enter the emission by themselves. So national administrators can do that, but again, this is dependable on the national laws applicable. I still have a list of questions. I'm not sure if I can move on with what.
Yes, please. I see there was a question also on, maybe I will read it out loud. So as an authorized representative nominated on several maritime operator holding accounts, do I have a unique user account and a single entry point to the different MOHAs, the different maritime operator holding accounts in the registry?
Yes. So the answer is, in short, yes. If you are an authorized representative of multiple accounts, regardless if they are maritime operators, operator holding accounts, I don't know, aircraft operators, you will have access to all of them. So all the accounts that you're linked to through the functionality of multi-account list from the new interface. So you will have an account which will grant you access to all of the accounts to which you as a representative are linked to.
Thank you. Thanks, Alexandra. I see there were also participants who watched the last webinar that we had a few weeks ago. And they said that the current user interface does not have the same design as the one that was showed in the live demo at the last webinar. So when will the new design be available?
Yes, the plan is to make available the new interface, including maritime implementation, starting next year, mid-January, more specific on January 15th. So yes, nobody has now access to the new interface. So we have, I think, exactly 1 month until everybody will get access to what has been presented last time from my colleagues.
Thanks a lot. Another question that is related to the registry, maybe a bit more specific, but is it possible to surrender a fraction of an allowance? So is it possible to enter emissions data with decimals? And if not, what is the rounding rule?
Okay, allowances are integer numbers. So for 1 ton of CO2 released, the shipping company must surrender 1 allowance. The rounding of emissions is done automatically through the standard arithmetic rules. So if we want to report, let's say, 0.7, that will be automatically rounded to one allowance to surrender. So basically, each shipping company must submit annual verified emissions expressed as integer numbers without decimals.
Thanks a lot. That's very useful to know. And one last question also on the registry. Who can support shipping companies in case of IT problems? And here, of course, we talk about the registry because it depends for ETS MRV. It's not the same entry and contact points, but for the registry, who should companies contact for IT related issues?
There's a help desk or support for each member state. So if any issues are encountered, those issues should be first reported to the national administrators. So the help desk and the national administrators are the first point of contact, and afterwards, if needed, they will contact us. That's how the process should move on.
Many thanks, Alexandra. And now I would like to move to other questions that we received that are more related not to the registry this time, but to the ETS MRV platform that is run by EMSA colleagues. So I would like to give the floor to our colleagues in Lisbon from EMSA. In particular, I see a question asking where can we start, when and where can we start preparing the monitoring plan via ETS MRV? So when will shipping companies be able to do that? And if you could please reply also then to another question that we received. And this is about if a ship changes of company. The question is, what do I have to do in ETS MRV if there is a company change? And when should I do that? So please, if you could answer these two questions from Lisbon, thanks.
Yes, good morning to everybody, and thank you for the questions. So regarding the preparation of the monitoring plan on ETS MRV, so we can say that preparation can be already started in the system using the user interface available there. It's important to understand that this is not yet the final system, but everything that you fill in on the user interface on TETIS MRV will be upgraded to the new templates and to the new requirements later on January. So we can also say that we have prepared the new XML schema to upload and download the monitoring plans in bulk. And this information is already available at TETIS MRV FAQs on the support webpage at EMSA. So you can go there and follow the instructions. And at the beginning of January, so with the release of the new TETIS MRV system, all these will be available at that moment. But it's important to understand that whatever you fill in on the TETIS MRV monitoring plan information will be then used later on and can be continued later on. Regarding the shipping company change, if yes, this might happen to have to change from shipping companies, but you have to understand that all the ships that are under my fleet of the company responsible by the ETS compliance must be there, and the companies there can only be the ISM or the ship owner companies. If one ship must change from one company to another company, independently of the reason, the previous company must submit the partial emission report, and the previous company must go to TETIS MRV, and on my fleet list, he must remove the vessel from the fleet once this is done. The new company must then at TETIS MRV select a ship and claim the ship by its IMO number, and at that moment he is in control of the vessel. Be aware, if you do a change of companies before the 1st of January, the previous company must submit the partial emission report and the new company the annual emission report for 2023. So if you do the change after the 1st of January, the new company will be responsible by the emission report after the date of effect of the change, and if relevant, you can do it by the 1st of January. So you can submit the date of effect of the taking control of the vessel once everything is done related to 2023. Also, be aware that some of these warnings are already on the TETIS MRV message that users can see as they go on the system and do the changes, the necessary changes. So follow the instructions that are available there. And of course, if you have technical questions related to TETIS MRV, you can always send them to the TETIS MRV help desk, which we will follow the questions and support as far as possible. So I think, Mathieu, I give you the floor. At the beginning of January, so with the release of the new TETIS MRV system, all these will be available at that moment. But it's important to understand that whatever you fill in on the TETIS MRV monitoring plan information will be then used later on and can be continued later on. Regarding the shipping company change, if yes, this might happen to have to change from shipping companies, but you have to understand that all the ships that are under my fleet of the company responsible by the ETS compliance must be there, and the companies there can only be the ISM or the ship owner companies. If one ship must change from one company to another company, independently of the reason, the previous company must submit the partial emission report, and the previous company must go to TETIS MRV, and on my fleet list, he must remove the vessel from the fleet once this is done. The new company must then at TETIS MRV select a ship and claim the ship by its IMO number, and at that moment he is in control of the vessel. Be aware, if you do a change of companies before the 1st of January, the previous company must submit the partial emission report and the new company the annual emission report for 2023. So if you do the change after the 1st of January, the new company will be responsible by the emission report after the date of effect of the change. And if relevant, you can do it by the 1st of January. So you can submit the date of effect of the taking control of the vessel once everything is done related to 2023. Also, be aware that some of these warnings are already on the ETS MRV message that users can see as they go on the system and do the changes, the necessary changes. So follow the instructions that are available there. And of course, if you have technical questions related to ETS MRV, you can always send them to the ETS MRV help desk, which we will follow the questions and support as far as possible. So I think, Mathieu, I give you the floor again, back to you.
Many thanks, Ricardo, for these explanations and clarifications. I think it's the key issue, this when will the maritime plans be, the new maritime plans be there in ETS, and because that's a key first step for shipping companies at the moment. Now I would like to go to more policy questions related to the Union Registry that we received. So Noklan, I would like to give you the floor for 2 questions that we received. Maybe the first one, when can we start opening accounts in the registry? Is it possible to do so before February 2024? And maybe linked to that, what are the consequences if shipping companies do not open a maritime operator holding account by the required deadline?
Thank you, Mathieu. IT-wise, it will be possible to open a maritime operator holding account from mid-January 24. But remember that there is some preparation to be done by shipping companies to request a maritime operator holding account. So in order to ensure a swift process of opening of accounts, you can already gather all the information that are listed in the annexes to the registry regulation. The references were on the slides that would be made available. We have understood that some member states have started to contact shipping companies in respect of the opening of maritime operator holding accounts. And this is related to the rules for the attribution of shipping companies. For shipping companies that are registered in a member state, it's quite obvious which member state will be their administering authority and national administrator. Some steps can already be undertaken as from today. But on the other hand, you have companies that are registered outside of the EEA. And as my colleague Tim explained, the attribution of those non-EEA registered companies will be based on port call data. And our colleagues in EMSA will calculate the port calls of those non-EEA companies and attribute them to the member states where they had most of their port calls. So for that, as a shipping company not registered in the EEA, you might not be able to assess who is your administering member state, your national administrator. So we will advise that you wait until the publication of the list, but you can already start collecting the documents that are necessary in any event that are common to all requests for MOHAs indifferently of the national rules. And on the second part of the question related to what happens if basically the shipping company does not request a maritime operator holding account or does not request such an account by the deadline. This is an issue because the maritime operator holding account is essential for the compliance with surrender obligations. And there are penalties set in the ETS directive in case of non-compliance with this surrender obligation, in addition to the penalties that are set at a national level. And among the penalties set at national level, there might be also penalties related to a late application for a MOHA. So our advice again is really start familiarizing yourself with the requirements and start preparing the documents so you can submit a complete application on time.
Thanks, Noklan. So if I summarize, to open the device is to wait for the publication of the list, but then please respect the required deadlines, otherwise there would be sanctions by the member states. Another question that is related to the registry, and it's coming from a maritime stakeholder registered outside the EEA. The question is, I would like to open a trading account, but there are requirements impossible for me to comply with, such as having a VAT number in the member states. So what should I do?
If as a non-EEA entity you really want your own trading account, indeed you must be aware that member states are allowed to apply certain conditions for the opening of trading accounts, such as having a permanent residence in the relevant member state or having a VAT number in that member state. The conditions vary. They depend on the national law of the member states. And for background, those conditions are the outcome of a balancing act, taking into account the risk of fraud. So that's why there could be some stricter conditions on the opening of trading accounts for entities that are not registered in the EEA. But it is important to note that it is not compulsory to have a trading account to be able to purchase and transfer allowances. You could do that via intermediaries such as financial institutions.
Many thanks, Noklan. I think that's it for the questions on the registry. We just have a few minutes left, so I would like to end with a few questions that we received related to the shipping company definition and things that I think have been addressed by the presentation, and maybe it's worth clarifying a few things and repeating in different words, because we received several questions. One, maybe for you, Luca, is the following. I am a technical manager and I have been working in ETS MRV submitting emissions data on behalf of the ship owner so far. Can I assume responsibility in respect of such ships in 2024? And is it possible for me to work on MRV compliance while leaving the ETS compliance to my customer, meaning the registered owner? I think the presentation has addressed this, but maybe worth clarifying this again. Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Matteo. This is an important point. And first of all, as already stressed during the presentation, we need to make clear once again, it's not possible to delink the MRV and ETS compliance legal responsibility. So the entity which assumes ETS responsibility shall be the same of the one assuming the responsibilities under MRV. It's not possible to delink those as of 2024. Another important point, because the terms technical manager, I understand you refer to Mathieu, qualifies a company which cannot be considered a shipping company within the meaning of the regulation and the directive, meaning, for instance, a technical manager which is not an ISM duly mandated. And again, the answer is simple. If that is the case, you cannot legally assume the responsibility for compliance for MRV ETS, because only the shipping company, meaning the register owner or the duly mandated ISM company duly mandated by the register owner, can assume such a responsibility. However, that being said, what we are referring here is the legal responsibility to comply. So if you as a shipping company still consider that you might wish operational support from third parties, such as charterers, technical manager, other companies which cannot qualify as shipping company, you can still do that. You will have your own contractual arrangements, and you will have the possibility to have these third parties support you both in ETS MRV and in the Union Registry, if you wish to do so. But please keep in mind that as a shipping company, you remain the ultimate responsible entity, not only for the correctness and accuracy of all emission submitting data through ETS MRV, but almost also and most importantly for the final compliance. So in case enforcement authorities will look for someone in relation to MRV and ETS compliance, it will be you, it will be the shipping company, not potential third parties which are supporting you from an operational point of view. Maybe just very quickly to specify on the operational side, I see two phases, two main channels here, ETS MRV and MOA and the Union Registry for such kind of account. So in ETS MRV, for monitoring and reporting of data, it was shown also by the presentation today, the system has enough flexibility. So there is possibility for this third operator to be granted access as users by the config admin user of the ETS MRV account, which shall be, it's recommended to be the shipping company. And once they're granted this access, these third operators can operate in ETS MRV. Again, legally, it will still be the shipping company responsible for whatever action is taken there. And in the Union Registry, again, it was mentioned also during the presentation, there is possibility through the mechanism of authorized representative to be present and take action such as carry out transaction in the MO account, also for these third operators, if duly mandated. And on these, maybe you might want to contact also the national administration of the registry to make sure that you comply with the requirements for this, and about the details of how this is going to take. Yeah.
Many thanks, Luca. I think it's useful indeed. If I would try to summarize, there are strict conditions for what is a shipping company for MRV and ETS compliance, but as Luca explained, from an operational point of view, there is more flexibility both in ETS and in the registry. So I think it is very good to know. I think we will need to close. Maybe one last question. It's not directly related to the focus of this webinar, but it was raised quite often in the chat, so worth clarifying this. It's about voyages that start and end in a different year. So for example, a voyage that starts in December and ends in February of the year after. Then how should a shipping company report these emissions? I don't know if Noklan or Luca, you...
Okay.
Luca, please.
Thank you. I will just very briefly close on this one because we receive many times this question and also through the help desk. So very briefly, with the revision of the MRV regulation, there is a new definition of reporting period, which in practice means we go for a split of emissions for such voyages. So we split the emissions of a voyage which starts in the first year and ends in the following year, and we attribute the relevant part of emissions to the relevant reporting period, which is different from the practice so far of MRV. Also, some companies ask, but this applies also to 2023, and the reply is yes, we recommend to do that to avoid any case of double counting. So if you start a voyage on the 20th of December 2023 and you end it on the 10th of January 2024, you should split. We're aware, of course, that MRV is a per voyage system based system, but we recommend to operate these de facto pragmatic split of emissions. So you will account, and this is relevant also for ETS scope, you will account the emissions and fuel consumption taking place until the 31st of December within the voyage to the previous year, and after 31st of December to the second year. So in the case of 2024, emissions taking place after the 31st of December within the voyage will have to be considered for ETS surrendering. Last point, how you will determine such emissions, you will have to determine them on the basis of the scope and the coverage of the whole voyage. So you take only the emissions from the 1st of January, but you look at the coverage, considering, of course, the entire voyage. So if the voyage starts, let's say, in Lisbon in 2023 and then in New York in 2024, you will consider these as an outgoing non-EEA voyage, so 50% scope within ETS. I hope this clarifies.
Thanks, Luca. I think it's clear. Hopefully, it will answer many questions we received on that today in the chat. With this, we are running out of time, so I would like to close this meeting. I would like to thank participants again for an active participation and attendance in this webinar. It shows that there is interest and ongoing preparation to be on time for the ETS extension to maritime transport as of January next year. I would like to stress again that we remain committed to support good implementation, and we will keep informing all stakeholders, possibly again through other webinars in 2024. Again, it was stressed during this meeting today, but I invite all participants to check regularly the DG CLIMA Maritime webpage as well as EMSA webpage, because there you will find lots of useful information, including the links to this webinar, but also the recordings of the previous webinars, as well as the presentations that were made. So everything is at your disposal on these websites. So please have a look. You will also find all the links to the relevant legislation and, importantly, an FAQ, so the most frequently asked questions with clear replies. And of course, the aim of these FAQs is that it has to be updated regularly so that it's up to date and it provides useful questions, useful replies to questions we most often receive. So it will be regularly updated. Please have a look at this. And if you don't find the answer you are looking for, please do not hesitate also to contact our help desk. These email addresses are there to help you in the implementation of the ETS, Maritime, and MRV. Thanks a lot to all colleagues today for their excellent presentations and for all of you for attending this webinar, and see you soon.